And without further ado, I'll hand over to Liz, who, as I mentioned, is the Director of Executive Education at the Open University. So over to you, Liz, and thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll just hopefully share my screen. Can you just confirm you can see that? Good.
Yep, got that, thanks.
Good stuff. Okay, well, welcome everyone to this afternoon's session. I'm glad things have been going so well, and I'm really pleased to be with you. You've had my job title, but perhaps it doesn't give you much of a clue as to what I do. What I do on a regular basis is I work with organisations, businesses or other types of organisations, often to put together programmes of learning to support their employees. Sometimes they're volunteers, sometimes they're leaders and managers to develop their own skills and expertise. And we do that through programs of learning, often using the courses that are available on our platforms here. But I'm here because I'm also had in a previous role, I've been the Open Media Fellow, so I've worked to create and to support the development of our new courses on our free learning platforms. And I've also worked to create courses actually on all of the platforms. I've created courses for them and been the liaison with FutureLearn, which is one of our sort of sister platforms. So that's why I'm here talking to you. I know a little about a lot, rather than a lot about a little. So hopefully that will work for you. I wonder if I could just start by asking, is there anybody who is totally unfamiliar with any of the platforms in the Open University? You might have used some or all of them. If you have, if you dare, just put a reaction like a thumb up or a wave to me on the platform, just to have a sense of if there's anybody that's really not ever used any of the platforms. Okay, so it sounds like everybody. Oh, we've got somebody that's so it looks like people have used some of them. Okay, fine. I just didn't want to insult anybody's intelligence, but let's make a start. What I'd like to do is just very quickly set the scene for learning and development in organisations. Also talk about the OU's approach to learning and development, and that comes through in how the platforms are set up and what they're used, and then really spend some time talking about the resources you have at your disposal in either for use in your organisation or for you personally to use them. I should also just say that I have actually worked in a voluntary organisation. I have worked with voluntary organisations, and I've been a volunteer. So I'm going to try and think myself back into that way of looking at it. This is not a commercial for the Open University. So let's start with the first of those sort of agenda items. Really all this slide, which comes from pre-pandemic, I did try and look at what the latest stats were on this are, but they haven't really been published in the same way. There hasn't been the same sort of follow-up survey done. But the point of this is not about the numbers, only that the message is that some people are obviously very busy and that they don't feel they have time to learn, which is a pity. But the more interesting thing for me is that there are so many different options for people to develop themselves. People are looking for some form of guidance or direction on where to target, how to target that learning, where to find that learning, how to narrow down some of the choices, and how to actually balance this idea of developing themselves, developing their skills with work or with volunteering, in fact, as well. So people do want guidance, and many of them feel they're not getting it. And the fact of the matter is that actually, even if you just think about your own experience, there are so many ways to learn. We're not only talking about formal sources of learning here, we're talking about informal courses. We're talking about informal ways of learning from our peers, learning from other people. We can download podcasts, we can read. We could read all day. So there are so many different ways that people can access learning, and it's not all through a university, it's not all through a college, it's not even in in the workplace. It's not about compliance or any of these things. Lots and lots of different ways to learn. So this brings me to how the Open University presents things. And if I can just move my cursor around the screen here, starting with the top left, there are 5 platforms that I want to talk to you about in brief, as it can only be today, just to explore with you some of the similarities and some of the differences between the platforms, so that you can see where perhaps you could direct people to, or you can use these for your own purposes. The first of these is our Open Learn platform, and I'm going to start in the middle actually. The first of these I'm going to talk about is the sort of the most formal learning platform. So this is what we call our virtual learning environment, and on that all of our degree and postgraduate qualifications are hosted. So you have to be an OU student to access this platform. This, to the top left with the turtle, this is the Open Learn platform. That's a free learning platform available to all. On the right hand side here is Open Learn Create, which is a form, it's a clone actually of the Open Learn, but with some differences, which I will talk about in the next slide. On the bottom left, this is what we call our CPD platform, and this is the one that my area of work in the business school has created. And on that, that's really specifically focused at leaders and managers in organizations. And it's there really to support organizational learning. And the bottom right, we have the Future Learn platform, which is a different it's 50% owned by the Open University. The Open University founded it, and originally it founded it to support MOOCs. But you can see that if you look at the bottom there, it goes beyond what the Open University offers, and there are a number of universities and indeed other types of organisations. So that looks like Morrison's Supermarkets, Accenture, the audit and consultancy company, and a whole host of other people are called partners, and they put content onto Future Learn. So a very busy slide. I'm going to focus in on some of this a little bit, but hopefully if you decide you want to have the slides, you can spend more time looking at these things. So maybe perhaps the first thing to do is to say, what do these things have in common? Well, the one thing that all of the Open University, so the top 4, the VLE, Open Learn Create, and the Cpd Site have in common is they're all based on a Moodle platform. Moodle will not mean anything, and it's not really that important, except that it does. The reason that that is the case is that the Open University is a major contributor to Moodle development, and it does that because all of the courses on any of these platforms are all written to be very much about active learning. Active learning, sometimes supported with tutor interaction and tutor support, but it's a type of presenting the courses so that all the materials that our learners need to be successful in studying the course are all there on the platform. So in that respect, that means that it caters for a number of different types of learning styles. There are the resources that are on these platforms. There are plenty of things for people to read, people to listen to. It's multimedia in that respect. There's third-party resources. People can watch things. They can write onto the platform, write into the courses and save their work there. They can participate in quizzes. They can get feedback. They from what they put onto the platform. So in that way, it's a very interactive way of studying, albeit that you might be studying on your own and not with a group of other people in some of these instances. So let's talk a little bit about these individually. This is a screen grab from one of the accredited modules on our virtual learning environment. So this is the main curriculum site. It covers content from across all of the faculties. So the Faculty of Business and Law, Faculty of Applied Social Sciences, STEM, and WELS, and indeed IET. So all of our curriculum is hosted on the VLE. and you can study that. So we've got a column here about where to find that. If you click through to that link, it will take you to a website called Study at the OU, and you can find out all about the modules, information, details about what's required to gain access to those qualifications or modules, whether that be entry qualifications or other situations, including how much they cost. The learning format in this column here, all of the materials that you require are to study the course are there. Some of the modules will come with textbooks. There are tutor group forums. There are tutors. I think Karen said she's an AL. So people like Karen are doing the teaching on our VLE. They will meet with people in tutor group forums and either live or online. But there are also student forums where people are in touch with them. So there's quite a lot of interactivity in there. Online, face-to-face, we do residentials for some of these courses as well. And not, to coin a phrase, not a lot of people know that, but there is actually quite a true blend of teaching style at the Open University. So there is support for learners. They're supported by tutors. There's also support for people inquiring about learning through the Student Support Centre. So if you go through to study at the Open University, you can also go through to the Student Support Services, and they will guide you on what courses are available depending on what it is that you're trying to do. And the way that these modules are packaged are in academic credits. So you can make up your degree or your qualification through 15, 30 or 60 credit modules. And that might lead to a certificate or a diploma, a degree, a master's degree or a research degree. So moving on. I've put together OpenLearn and OpenLearn Create because one of the big differences is that OpenLearn has now had something like 10 million viewers of it. It's a site which propels people. People are propelled to it through things like our BBC programmes. They're propelled to it through much of our marketing. It's where there's a lot of informal learning. And Helen's going to talk a little bit more about OpenLearn later on in more detail. But again, the full range of the curriculum and more is on OpenLearn, and all of those materials are free to learn. Louise has put the link to it there. You have to search for courses on that, and you search not so much under faculties, but through the groupings of subject matter there. So you pick that. What I should say is on this platform, as well as on the VLE, there are alternative formats. So you can download the courses to work offline, and you can download Word copies of these courses, which of course mean that it's not interactive when it's downloaded, but you can do that. So genuinely, all of these platforms allow you to work flexibly. They're available 24/7 for people to study, which really increases flexibility for people who are working. The difference between, apart from the scale and the investment that has gone into OpenLearn and the millions of visitors that have gone onto that one, because it supports all of our curriculum, OpenLearn Create was produced or was created for a different reason, really. And I mention it because it may be of interest to some larger organisations, because you can actually create your own course and learning materials on OpenLearn Create. And that's really what it was produced to do. But it does have collections of courses. We do use it to host courses for organisations who want to co-create materials with us. So it's worth looking at that one. And they both have, although these are not formally accredited, they are non-accredited. These courses, many of them are badged. Yes, so digital badges, good questions. Stephen, thank you for that. Stephen? I think it was Stephen. Yes. A digital badge is really just the equivalent of a certificate, but it's the kind of, because it's digital, you can attach it to your LinkedIn profile or your social media profile. So if you were to send an application to into someone, you could download a certificate if you needed proof of your successful completion of the course. But the digital badge is is one that can't be eliminated. It's attached to your LinkedIn profile if you have one of those, and you can show people I've completed this course. Does that explain it, Stephen? I hope so.
Absolutely. No, that's
Good
very
stuff.
helpful. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Good stuff, no problem. And a badged online course is really just a particular form of course which is 24 hours long, and it's assessed through quizzes. So it's a format of course, but badged means it has a digital badge attached to it. The Cpd site is one that the executive education team have put together. And as I've said before, it really concentrates its content on learning for leaders and managers, looking at contemporary issues that people in organisations face. And we use these as a really as a sort of the raw materials to put together programmes for groups of people. So we will look at what their business challenge is, and then we can draw on that content and then put other content services to wrap around those to make it a sort of bespoke package for the employer. And the courses we've created, unlike the free courses, thank you, unlike the free courses, these are paid for. So you can see the price range there. There's no academic credit attached to them, but there is CPDSO, so the Continuing Professional Development Standards Office accreditation for some of these courses. And I've put in the link to the executive education site there, because then you can see, they can download flyers to see what's on these things. So there isn't a study at the OU category for that. And finally, Future Learn. As I've already mentioned, you can do micro-credentials, which are 10 or 15, that should be 15 credit courses from the Open University and a number of other universities. It's a slightly different learning format, but it also is supported by tutors. Just in the last couple of minutes, why would people study these CPD courses? Sometimes it's for individuals, sometimes it's for people that are looking to see what would it be like to study a degree or a university course online, to understand how that all works. And then for most of the people in terms of our professional development courses, they're really looking to gain valuable management skills and knowledge. So I'm not going to go through all of this now, but maybe we'll come back to it if people want to do it. But this is really how I think about putting together these programs. I start up here with the audience. What's the learner profile? So what kind of course they need to do? What kind of times do they have available? Do they have a budget? Is there a particular outcome they're looking for? Is it just for interest? That helps me to understand what the gap in learning is. It also helps me to understand a little bit about the constraints of time or money that we might be looking at. So all of these platforms are potential resources, but just thinking back to the first slide, of course, there are many other resources we could have, including perhaps people, experts that are part of your board or part of your network that could be involved in delivering training or learning. So these can all be used in combination to make something that's bespoke for you. And that's how you can create the variety and also accessibility for people depending on their budgets and their time constraints and all the rest of it, and their learning style. I would always suggest that if you are going to use these materials, you do need to test at some point to see if it's working, and think about how it's going to be possible to sustain it, because that's the biggest issue with learning and development, keeping it going. So understanding your challenging and understanding your audience is really your starting point for these things. And I think I'm just out of time. But if you want to, we can come back to just that process that I've described there at a later point. I'll stop there, Daniel.
Thanks so much, Liz. Yeah, and as you've sort of taken Stephen's question as we go, but please, everyone else, if you've got any more questions, add them to the chat. But do you want to just go through that last slide then, Liz, as we've got a bit of time?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it really was just to say that, you know, in terms of these sort of tips, I wasn't sure who would be in the audience, if it was people that were trying to put together programs for people in their own organizations, or if they wanted to understand, well, how would I sort of curate all of these resources? And in a way, you need to have a starting point. So this is an example actually from somebody who asked me to put a program together for them. So they came with a particular challenge, which as a voluntary organization we need to be a little bit more commercially aware of what's going on. People need to think more in business terms to help sustain the future of the organization. So once you understand what your challenge is and you're clear about who your learners are, you can start to produce some learning outcomes for them, and that helps you. It's a good starting point for curating the materials that you might want to use. So it might be that there are some courses, online courses, or even some videos that you pick up on OpenLearn, and you can use them for free. I should just point out, one of the things that I didn't say is that the materials are free to learn on OpenLearn, OpenLearn Create. They're not free to use if you're using them as a consultant to work with other people, unless people are not paying for that service. So in other words, there are certain rights and permissions that surround the content on these platforms, and you just need to be clear about that, because if you infringe intellectual property rights and the rights that we've negotiated to use in these courses, then there's serious consequences and reputational damage to the Open University. And they in turn would pass that on to the people that are infringing the rights of the people that produce the intellectual property. So that's a very complicated way of saying, if you're a voluntary organisation and you want to use these things for free with groups of people, it's fine to do that. If you wanted to charge people for the learning you're putting together for them, you can't do that. So learning is best when it's facilitated by people, and we've spoken about it. And tutorials are good ways of bringing people together that have been doing otherwise self-study. So that's why the program then, when you look at that, if you start with what you're trying to achieve and understanding your participants, and you understand what it is they need to learn, you can then pull together the program that will help to support those learning outcomes and the mix of ways that are going to be delivered with that. And it's, as I say, I think if I was working in a learning organisation now, I didn't know, but when I worked in it, we didn't have OpenLearn in the Open University, didn't have the blinking internet when I was working my first job in a voluntary organisation. So this for me would have been absolute manna. I'll pause again. And I think somebody just put in a good point about the quality of the materials that are on OpenLearn.
Really
and
good
I think
thing
Helen
to
will come to that.
Yeah, and that cuts across, obviously, Liz, doesn't it, across all the OU platforms.
Yes.
Even the OpenLearn Create stuff that can be developed by organisations or individuals is very often done in conjunction with OU academics, isn't it? I'm thinking of the Volunteer Scotland material that's on the course that's on there that CVSL helped to develop. But that's a really good aspect as well, isn't it? That you sort of hinted at, which was the circle of learning. You could start off with a very informal course. You can build up through that, and actually then you can use the platform itself to create a learning set for your whole organisation if you wanted to.
And you get that blend, that almost that knowledge exchange going on there, because you have the practitioner examples, views, and knowledge of how things work. You have the academic rigor that sits behind that, but you also have that understanding of pedagogy, and that's why some people choose to put courses onto OpenLearn Create. So I did a range of about 7 or 8 of those with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office some time ago, and that was a very good collaborative project, trying to contain the massive amount of information that they wanted to put into courses.
Yeah, because very often we find in the voluntary sector, it's the capacities across the board, isn't it? So it's capacity of individuals to learn, to have the space to learn in their organisations, but it's also capacity of organisations to find a way to structure, whether it's internal training or external training, whatever it is, and learning. And I think the OU obviously provides that across the board if that's what people want to do. So yeah, lots of entry points, and then lots of more ways that people can go, as you pointed out.
Yep, indeed.
Okay, so any more sort of questions and comments then for Liz before we go on to talk a bit about CVSL's specific offer? Just leave it a moment for anyone.
Hi Liz, the only reason I mentioned it's Steve, the digital badges, that I've heard the term used in different contexts, and sometimes it's not always been made clear. and can confuse the learner. So that was the only reason. And it sounds like, you know, you're very clear about that.
Yeah. Again, it's supposed to just be an indelible way of building your credentials. For some people, I think for a number of people, they are using places like platforms like OpenLearn to build, not just to build their confidence, but to try and move their career in another direction, perhaps to get into work or to get into a job or a role. And so they want to demonstrate that they've done this learning. And so that's where it's come from, really allowing people to demonstrate I've achieved all of this, I've done all of this in a way. And other people will use it for CPD points if they're trying to maintain their professional status. It's a way of evidencing that you have done some form of study and that you are keeping yourself employable, keeping yourself current with your knowledge and your learning.
Thanks very much. That's really helpful. Cheers. Thanks, Liz.
Welcome.
Great. Okay, thanks so much for that, Liz. And I should
Thank
mention
you.
as well, I did say right at the start, but then when I went through the agenda, I missed it off because it was on the other page. Liz is coming back as well after we've had the Q&A, the second Q&A. So Liz will be back at 3:45 for a bit of a discussion about what next potentially for your organisations before we wrap up. So thanks a lot for that first bit, Liz.
Thank you.
Great overview, and we'll hear from you in a little while.